In the hush of the late evening, as the world outside slows to a whisper, imagine pressing play on a story that drifts far beyond the familiar. Welcome, dear listener, to The Faded Clock. If you've found peace in these late-night journeys before, consider resting your mind here again, subscribing so you won't miss where the tides of time may take us next. Tonight, we set sail across an ocean of deep history, into an age so long, so quiet, it has been called the Boring Billion. But was it truly boring? Or was it something far more mysterious, far more delicate? Picture the Earth nearly 2 billion years ago. The continents, worn low and flat, lays under a pale and weaker sun. The seas stretch wide, warm and green, rich with life so small it can barely be seen. 1 billion years pass in this tranquil state, as if the planet is holding its breath. No towering forests, no wings beating in the air, no sound of creatures calling through the night. And yet, something endures. Life lingers, survives. Perhaps you wonder, how could life persist through so much stillness? How could it last through a billion-year pause without withering away? Let us wander gently through this question, not to seek quick answers, but to follow where it leads. Imagine tiny cells, ancient and patient, adrift in those oceans like specks of dust in a vast green cathedral. They float under skies rich with a hazy, ruddy glow. The moon above is closer than, bright and swollen, and its pull stirs gentle tides. Volcanoes simmer softly at the edges of continents, whispering minerals into the waters like quiet offerings. The world is quiet, but it is not dead. It is dreaming. As we drift further back in time, we meet a planet still young in spirit. Earlier ages were wild, violent with meteor strikes, ice ages and firestorms. Yet now Earth finds itself in a lull, like a musician holding a single, suspended note before the melody resumes. Some call it a plateau. Others call it the calm before the storm of complex life. The rocks from this era tell their own patient story. Flat layers upon flat layers, as though painted by a careful hand over hundreds of millions of years. Mountains rise slowly, erode gently, and sink into the seas, again and again. The same small organisms persist, blue-green bacteria, single-celled eukaryotes, quietly weaving the thread of life without break. Why? Perhaps because they can. Perhaps because the universe was waiting for a spark. Imagine, for a moment, drifting in that warm primordial ocean. All around you are colonies of cyanobacteria, weaving faint oxygen into the air. They form stromatolites, layered mounds like sleeping turtles, slowly growing toward the sunlight. It is quiet, but not empty. It is simple, but not lifeless. The question lingers like a soft echo. What allowed life to hold on so long, with so little change? As you feel the weight of this thought, let your mind wander. Maybe where you are listening from tonight, there are stars overhead. Those same stars once shone down on a quiet world too. Their light travels across time, touching a moment when Earth was a dreamer. Scientists debate this epoch. Some say Earth was trapped in a delicate balance. The atmosphere carried enough oxygen to sustain microbes, but not enough to ignite the engines of rapid evolution. Others imagine a world rich with trace metals, nickel, molybdenum, rising and falling with the breath of volcanoes, subtly feeding and starving the ancient cells. Was this slow drip of nutrients the secret to survival? Or was there something else? Some invisible harmony between rock, water, and sky that nurtured life through the long wait? And yet, as still as it seems, nothing in nature is truly motionless. The continents were wandering then, slowly drifting like immense rafts. The oceans shifted. Subtle chemical whispers passed between the depths and the sky. Perhaps there were moments of beauty we cannot imagine. Vast mats of green clinging to shallow seas, glowing faintly under an alien moon. Microbial films sparkling with bioluminescence as night fell on ancient tides. Even in the boring billion, Earth's canvas was painted with quiet wonder. Consider too the patience of life itself. 1 billion years of stillness may seem endless to us, yet to the cosmos it is but a pause, like the space between heartbeats. Perhaps you've felt pauses in your own life, Moments when little seems to change, when the world feels quiet, almost too quiet. But under the surface, something is always stirring. That was true for Earth. Even in the boring billion, evolution did not sleep. Tiny innovations occurred. Cells began experimenting with complexity, forming internal structures, learning to cooperate, preparing for futures they could not see. The stage for all future life, forests, birdsong, whale song, and us, was being built quietly without fanfare. It is soothing to think that survival sometimes requires patience rather than drama. That in the soft glow of those ancient seas, life learned endurance. Maybe, just maybe, this age was not boring at all. It was the Earth meditating, breathing slowly, storing potential. And as we glide deeper into this story, we will explore what this long calm can teach us. Not just about the past, but about time, waiting, and what it means to endure. As you let these images settle, imagine yourself floating with those ancient tides. There is no rush here, no loud conclusion, only the open horizon of what's to come. Let's follow the currents now, gently, toward the next chapter of our drifting tale, as the quiet world whispers secrets across 1 billion years. Drifting deeper into the stillness of that ancient Earth, let us follow the quiet currents into the heart of the so-called boring billion. The seas cradle us, warm and heavy with minerals. The air above carries only a whisper of oxygen, just enough to tint the sky a faint blue by day, and at night, the stars gleam unbroken by any flicker of firelight. There are no eyes to see them, no ears to hear the sighing tides, and yet, the universe hums here all the same. Perhaps you imagine this silence as empty. But what if the silence was fertile? What if this long age was not a void but a womb? Picture the continents spread low and broad, their edges laced with shallow seas. Along these coastlines, mats of microbes stretch like living carpets, catching sunlight, releasing oxygen molecule by molecule. The process is so slow you could wait a lifetime and see no change, yet across millions of years these breaths alter the world. Quietly, invisibly, foundations are being laid. In the rocks of that era, scientists find signs of continuity. Sediments layered without interruption, as though time itself had slowed to a crawl. Some say the stability came from the balance between Earth's mantle and crust, its deep interior and shifting plates. There was little upheaval. Mountains rose but gently, and weathering kept nutrients trickling steadily into the seas. It was an age of equilibrium. Imagine Earth as a meditating figure, seated firmly, breathing evenly, holding space for what was yet to come. Perhaps, as you listen, you wonder how anything could survive without change. We're accustomed to stories of great dramas, mass extinctions, meteors, evolutionary leaps. But there is another kind of story, the story of endurance. These ancient microbes, so small you could fit thousands on the head of a pin, endured through patience. They formed alliances. Some became early eukaryotes, cells with internal organs of a sort, developing nuclei, mitochondria. These are the ancestors of every plant, every animal, every person. The boring billion cradled their slow experiments. In the absence of urgency, they were free to refine the tools of complexity. Think of it like a painter preparing pigments, grinding minerals, mixing oils long before brush meets canvas. The canvas of Earth was wide open, but the colors of life needed depth. Inside those tiny cells, small miracles unfolded. Ways to process energy more efficiently, ways to store information, ways to cooperate. It is soothing to think of these changes, not as sudden revolutions, but as whispers, slow revelations drawn out over eons. The oceans themselves played a part in this meditation. The deep waters were often anoxic, lacking oxygen, while the shallow shelves carried just enough to support microbial mats. This created a gradient, a layering of chemical worlds. Imagine drifting down into those depths. The light fades, the water grows still and black, and strange microbial communities feast on sulfur and iron. They, too, were part of the endurance. Even the so-called darkness of the deep had its caretakers. And above, the sun poured steady light onto a stable world. The sun of 2 billion years ago was dimmer, its warmth muted compared to today. Yet this, too, was part of the balance. Too much heat or cold would have brought catastrophe. Instead, the Earth sat in a gentle cradle. This allowed time, vast, almost unimaginable time, for life to fine-tune its machinery. As you picture this, perhaps you feel your own breath slowing, matching that ancient rhythm. There is a peace in patience. Some scientists suggest that it was precisely this long stability that made complex life possible later. Like a sleeper gathering strength before waking, Earth's biosphere used the boring billion to practice, to endure, to prepare. When the world eventually changed, when oxygen surged, when animals arose, it happened on the foundation built here. Without this era, perhaps nothing we know today could have existed. It is a humbling thought that boredom, as we might call it, can be the womb of possibility. And there are mysteries still hidden. Fossils from this time are rare whispers in stone. But some reveal filaments, colonies, even hints of multicellularity beginning to bloom. Picture tiny chains of cells clinging together, experimenting with being more than one. No eyes, no nerves, no thoughts, just cooperation. Perhaps they didn't know why. Perhaps there was no why. But in their patience, they planted the seeds of forests and fish and us. Meanwhile, the continents drifted slowly, locked in a long dance. Rivers carried silt to the seas. The air thickened slightly with oxygen, then thinned again. Volcanic islands erupted softly in the warm waters, adding iron to the oceans, nourishing invisible fields of microbes. There were no predators then, no prey, just the gentle flow of energy from sun to cell. In such a world, time itself feels different. As you drift with this vision, maybe you sense how small we are compared to these spans of history, and yet how connected we are to them. Where you sit or lie now, perhaps in the stillness of night, the atoms in your body, your breath, your blood, carry echoes of those ancient seas. The iron in your blood was forged in long-dead stars, carried through the boring billion by microbes that breathed and died, layer upon layer. This story is not distant. It is inside you. As we float in this meditation, let the quiet settle around you. Life in that age had no need to hurry. Perhaps there's a lesson there for us, in a world that often rushes. What might patience build in our own lives? What possibilities wait quietly for their moment? The boring billion asks these questions softly, like ripples on an ancient tide. And now, as the stars of that silent sky will overhead, let us drift onward. There are more whispers to hear, more mysteries of survival to uncover. For though the age was long and quiet, it held within it the seeds of everything yet to come. Let us continue adrift, carried by the slow tides of a world that knew no haste. We have lingered in the shallows, among mats of cyanobacteria and the first whispers of complex cells. But now imagine letting yourself sink deeper into time, following the currents into realms few can picture. The boring billion was not truly barren. It was filled with slow alchemy. Rocks, water, atmosphere, and life engaged in a delicate conversation lasting a billion years. Close your eyes, if you wish, and envision the continents from above. They are smaller than today, and their shapes are unfamiliar. Laurentia, Nuna, and Rodinia, names given much later, drift across the surface like immense puzzle pieces. They gather nutrients as they move, eroding under rainfall, delivering subtle streams of phosphorus into the seas. It is this slow supply of food that allowed the microbes to endure. No sudden feast, no devastating famine, just an endless trickle. Picture river mouths spilling their cargo into green waves, sunlight dancing on surfaces no creature sees. Perhaps you wonder, did nothing dramatic happen during this age? There were moments. Now and then, volcanoes burst forth more fiercely, painting skies with ash, feeding the oceans with metals. Lightning struck, storms swept across the low continents, the moon's pull shifted the tides. Yet all this happened against the backdrop of profound stillness. If you could stand on an ancient shore, the horizon would be wide and quiet. No birdsong, no buzzing insects, just wind, waves, and the faint scent of microbial life baking under the sun. Even myths, if they could reach back so far, might have whispered of a sleeping world. Later cultures would speak of cosmic eggs, dreaming gods, or ages of mist before creation. In some sense, those old tales echo a truth. There was a time when Earth itself seemed asleep, when the drama was inward, not outward. Inside tiny cells, complexity was assembling piece by patient piece. Mitochondria, the energy engines of complex cells, are thought to have joined their hosts in this age, the result of an ancient symbiosis. Imagine one cell engulfing another, not to consume, but to cooperate. Without that quiet alliance, no tree, no bird, no human would exist. It soothes the mind to consider that cooperation, not competition, might have been the great turning point of life's story. And it happened in this long, unhurried era. As you drift with this thought, feel how time stretches. Millions of years pass like moments. Continents drift. The atmosphere breathes in slow rhythm. Microbial colonies rise and fall like tiny empires, unseen except in the whispers of stone. Beneath the waves, minerals slowly accumulate. Iron once stained the oceans a rusty red, but by now much of it has been locked into rocks. Oxygen remains low, yet enough seeps into the shallows to allow new experiments in life. Some cells grow larger. Some cling together. Some begin to sense light and shadow. If you listen softly, you can almost hear their patient work. They are weaving the fabric of the future, thread by microscopic thread. And in the depths, beyond sunlight's reach, other communities thrive. There, ancient microbes feast on chemicals seeping from hydrothermal vents. These deep-sea oases, black smokers as we call them now, may have sheltered early innovations. Imagine towering chimneys spewing mineral-rich plumes, surrounded by clouds of bacteria. No eyes watch them, no fish dart among them, but life pulses there nonetheless, stubborn against the darkness. It is a reminder that existence finds a way, even when the world above seems uneventful. What does it mean to survive for 1 billion years without change? Perhaps change was happening in ways too subtle for us to see. Perhaps the lesson of the boring billion is that deep time moves differently, that creation sometimes favors whispers over shouts. As you consider this, let your own thoughts drift to stillness in your life, times when growth was invisible but real. This ancient story is also, in its own way, a meditation on patience. The sun continues its slow brightening. The continents inch closer together. By the end of this era, Rodinia, a supercontinent, will form. But for now, the pieces are scattered, cradling warm inland seas. If you stood on one of those ancient shores, you might see purple mats of bacteria shimmering under the sun. For not all photosynthesis then relied on chlorophyll as it does now. Colors strange to us painted those coasts. Greens, purples, perhaps even iridescent sheens in tidal pools. The Earth of the boring billion was not boring to itself. It was a quiet kaleidoscope, and as night falls on that faraway world, the sky blazes with stars unpolluted by human light. The Milky Way arches like a silver river. The moon looms larger, tides sweeping farther inland. No eyes watch, but still it is beautiful. The thought can be comforting. Beauty exists even when unseen. Perhaps it always has. Where you are listening now, maybe the world around you feels busy, rushed. Let the contrast soothe you. There was a time when Earth moved in slow motion, when life took its time. And yet here we are, proof that patience can lead to wonders. This is why we ask, how did life survive the boring billion? Because in its endurance lies the seed of all later marvels. So let us drift onward, further along this vast river of time. Ahead lie new mysteries, hints of why the long stillness finally gave way to bursts of change. But not yet. For now, we linger in the calm, listening to the quiet heartbeat of an ancient world, half asleep, half dreaming, carrying life forward one patient tide at a time. The calm stretches on, and we follow it like travelers on a river with no visible end. 1 billion years is an ocean of time, and yet life did not falter. Let us imagine why. Perhaps it is here, in this quiet cradle, that life learned resilience. Imagine drifting over shallow continental shelves, where the sunlight spreads softly into warm, green water. Below, the microbial mats shift gently with the tides, carrying on their slow alchemy. They release oxygen, not in great floods, but in the faintest of whispers. A molecule here, a molecule there, taken up by stone, rusted into iron. The sky is still pale, the air too thin for a breath as we know it, and yet, in time, it thickens. In your mind's eye, picture the Earth not as a static world, but as a slow dancer. Its continents drift, plates rumble deep beneath the oceans, the mantle stirs. Volcanic arcs rise from the sea floor, painting black sand across unknown coasts. Ash falls into the shallow seas, delivering nutrients, then washes away. This slow, steady cycle might seem monotonous, but it is a conversation between Earth and life. The rocks feed the microbes, and the microbes alter the atmosphere. They build a balance so stable it could last 1 billion years. There are hints, too, that the boring billion was not entirely still. Strange fossils from this time suggest that life was experimenting. Filaments and colonies show possible beginnings of multicellularity. Cells sticking together, sharing tasks. No eyes, no limbs, but perhaps faint chemical signals passing between neighbors. Imagine tiny living threads carpeting the seabed, shimmering faintly with biofilms, rising and falling with each day's sun. These are the quiet architects of tomorrow. And perhaps you are wondering, why does this patience matter? Because later, when the world bursts into complexity, when animals swim and forests rise, it will be built on this patient groundwork. Without the billion-year lull, there might have been no time for the slow negotiation of life and Earth's chemistry. It was here that oxygen found its foothold, not yet abundant, but persistent. It was here that cells learned cooperation. It was here that survival became an art. Now let your mind wander farther, beyond the shallows, into the ancient deep ocean. It is dark there, anoxic, heavy with dissolved metals. At hydrothermal vents, superheated water gushes into blackness. Towering chimneys of minerals loom like cathedrals. Around them, microbial life clings, feeding on the chemical energy of Earth's core. They do not need sunlight, they have heat and minerals. Even here, far from the sky, life persists. It is humbling to think that even in the planet's darkest corners, the thread of life was never broken. Above, the moon pulls on the tides. It was closer then, its face brighter and larger in the night sky. Its gravity stirs currents that circulate nutrients. The tides wash the mats of microbes, spreading their descendants across coasts. Without this lunar dance, perhaps life would have stagnated. In this sense, survival was not just an earthly project. It was cosmic. The sun, the moon, the earth itself, all conspired to keep life alive. The myths of later ages tell of long ages of sleep before creation, or gods dreaming the world into being. There is something poetic in how those tales resonate with this scientific mystery. The boring billion can seem like a dream, a long meditation before awakening. And dreams have their purpose. Inside those cells, mitochondria took hold. Chloroplasts appeared, capturing sunlight more efficiently. Each innovation was a small dream, a whisper of the future. Maybe where you are listening now, the world feels noisy, fast, demanding. But as you breathe with this story, sense the calm beneath it. Time has room for stillness. Life's greatest achievements were not always born in crisis. Some were born in patience. This thought may settle over you like the ancient twilight over Rodinia, the supercontinent beginning to form toward the end of this era. Imagine vast interiors of land with no grass, no animals, only wind and rock, and on the coasts, microbial mats painting the shorelines. The world looks empty to us, but to those cells it was everything. It is soothing to think of the earth like this, almost timeless, almost outside of story. And yet, change was always approaching. Far in the future, oxygen will rise suddenly, animals will emerge, and the quiet will end. But that is not where we are. We are still adrift in the lull, letting the whispers of deep time wash over us. As you drift with them, feel how your thoughts slow, how the weight of a billion years humbles the rush of today. Perhaps you have asked yourself how fragile life is, and how improbable its persistence seems. And yet here is the evidence, a billion years of quiet survival. Through every tide and storm, every subtle shift of land and sky, the thread of life never snapped. What was the secret? There may be no single answer. Some say it was chemical balance. Others say it was the adaptability of cells. Still others wonder if it was sheer luck. But perhaps the deeper lesson is that the universe allows for patience. Life can rest and still endure. Now we float toward the end of this quiet era, though not yet to its conclusion. The stage is still being set. The oceans still breathe. The continents still wander. The sky still waits for wings. And so we linger a little longer in this cradle of endurance, listening to the soft hum of ancient seas, the murmurs of stones weathering under alien suns. We have wandered far, yet the heart of the question remains. How did life survive? We are circling closer to answers, but like the slow tides, we will arrive in time. Let us drift a little further into this meditative age, as the earth dreams onward through its billion-year night. And so we find ourselves nearing the far shore of that billion-year night, still adrift on its slow and tranquil tides. The earth has turned its face to the sun millions upon millions of times, and yet to life in those ages, each sunrise was much like the last. If you pause for a moment, you can almost feel the weight of that constancy. No forests ever interrupted the horizon. No sound but the wind on stone and the murmur of waves on microbial mats. And still, the thread of existence held. Imagine now that we could watch this age in time-lapse, not days or centuries, but entire epochs flowing like clouds across a sky. We would see continents drifting together, colliding gently, forming Rodinia and breaking apart again. We would watch shallow seas expand and contract like lungs. We would see the slow breathing of oxygen into the air, never quite rising enough to spark dramatic change, but enough to sustain the microbial web. Each flicker of lightning, each whisper of volcanoes, each pull of the moon's tides, all feeding the same patient rhythm. As we drift across this vision, it's tempting to ask why. Why so long? Why so still? Perhaps there was no need for haste. Perhaps life's story is not only about progress, but about learning to endure. Inside those tiny eukaryotic cells, partnerships deepened. Mitochondria refined their work. Chloroplasts perfected the art of drinking sunlight. These invisible achievements laid the foundation for all that would follow. Without the quiet work of this age, there would be no Cambrian explosion, no sudden burst of animals and ecosystems. The silence prepared the way for the song. Picture, if you will, a purple and green coastline under a dimmer sun. The mats shimmer at the water's edge. The air smells faintly of salt and minerals. No sound of wings or footsteps, just the ceaseless, unhurried wash of tide. You look up at night, and the Milky Way floods the sky, the moon looming larger than it does today, its pull carving tides that sweep microbial spores across continents. Beauty exists here even if unseen. Maybe that is one of the gentle truths of this story, that the world can be beautiful even without eyes to behold it. Toward the close of the boring billion, change begins to stir. Oxygen levels inch upward. Nutrients wash more freely into the seas as mountains rise and weather. There are hints in the rocks of new experiments. Red beds that show oxygen's creeping reach, fossilized filaments that suggest multicellular cooperation. The stage is being set for revolutions to come, but they are still only whispers. The great drama waits, like a symphony poised on its first chord. And perhaps that is the thought to cradle as you rest, that even long waiting has purpose. As you drift with this idea, consider the patience of the cosmos. Stars themselves are patient. They burn for billions of years, fusing elements slowly, feeding future worlds with their light. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you breathe, all were prepared across eons, through processes unhurried and vast. When you think of the boring billion, You are thinking of that same patience expressed on earth, an ancient lullaby humming beneath time's current. Maybe where you are listening tonight, the world feels chaotic, ever-changing. And yet, deep time whispers another lesson, that sometimes stability is its own kind of miracle. The microbes of that age needed no wars, no predators, no sudden leaps. They needed only to endure, and by doing so, they gifted us the possibility of forests, oceans filled with life, and skies alive with wings. That is how life survived. Quietly, persistently, gently. Now imagine the end of this long lull approaching. Rodinia's coasts hum with microbial life. The first stirrings of more complex creatures lie just ahead. The Earth's chemistry is shifting, subtle signals that the quiet is ending. But we will not rush there. Let us linger instead in the twilight of this meditative age, grateful for its stillness. For without this deep sleep of Earth, there would be no dreamers like us. And as we let this image settle, we reach the edge of our journey. Not with a firm answer, but with an open question, as all good stories of deep time must end. How did life survive the boring billion? We have traced whispers, imagined quiet coastlines, listened to the hum of hydrothermal vents, and yet mystery remains. Perhaps that is as it should be. Some questions are meant to cradle us, not resolve. So as you close your eyes, or simply rest in thought, let the stillness of that ancient earth linger in you. Picture the patient tides, the dim sun, the silent stars. Life endured, and so do we. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in that endurance lies a lesson for our own lives. What quiet dreams are waiting in us, biding their time? What seeds of wonder rest in stillness? The story leaves us here, floating between question and dream, where the past meets the infinite. Drift with it, and let the whisper of the boring billion carry you into whatever thoughts or sleep you need. The earth endured, and its quiet heart still beats in you.